Okay, so I've done a few on this guy. Unfortunately, he keeps making sure that there's more material that needs to get looked at because it's just so deep and thick. And to really get a better appreciation of just how well the swindle's been run, you really need to start getting into these details. So this one's going to go unpack a particular kind of what would I call it? I don't know if it's sophisticated, but it's sophisticated enough for those who aren't really astute and are using their discernment to fall into. And this is his use of the word sovereignty, the US Constitution, and his dismissal of the Magna Carta, and the contradiction of all of that, because they all are based on one principle, right? And if you don't understand the principle, you won't understand the connection. So you think it's easy to dismiss, and the two are unrelated, is what I'm trying to say. So let's play it, and we'll get into it from that point.
It gets to the point where they must understand at a deep level that this idea of sovereignty, again, and it's a big deal because people cannot define it, they don't understand it, they don't know what it means.
So let's just say, if you're someone who's espousing to help the people live free, and you've identified that as a problem, that people don't know sovereignty, what it means, how to live it, how to express it, why would you keep it from them? That's your first question. Wouldn't you want to help them get to a point where they can understand it? Wouldn't you want to show them some resources and then they can go figure it out for themselves, but at least point them in the direction? But that's like going to a school and then just having the teacher just throw a bunch of questions at you, and then you just got to figure it out and not even know how to even start, right? And then they just leave the room. That's pretty much the same thing. So where's the value in that? Like, isn't that our innate capacity and our being to want to help others get to a point where they can help themselves? Is he helping you do that, or is he making you dependent? You get to decide.
They just want somebody else to take care of them. Well, that's not going to happen.
No, you want someone else to take care of them while you make sure that they stay ignorant and give them misinformation. Geez, I wonder, no contradiction there, maybe.
But even to the point where, and as you know, I lean heavily on this document here, the Declaration and the Constitution of the United States.
There you go. So he's just said it right. He leans heavily on that. Most people who followed him would hear him talk about that over and over again. Like, that's the bee's knees. That's the epitome of freedom. A free society is that US Constitution. Well, how's that working out for them? Are they any freer than any other despotism, concealing itself as democracy? They've got more guns than the military, and are they any freer? I didn't see any difference. So, proof's in the pudding, guys. It all comes down to knowledge and your will to do something about it. And right now, very few people have any more than they did before this pantomime started. And he's not helping. He's making sure you have even less. So now we're going to go into something else he said to do with the Magna Carta. So I'll be right back. Here we go. He's going to introduce this constitutional convention that he's running. From my understanding, he's got about 44,000 people on his Telegram group. I don't know what other connections he has. That's not even, I don't know what percentage that is of the Australian population, but it's quite tiny. It's a fraction. And somehow he reckons, even if those people are serious and organised, which they won't be, because you get all kinds of people, right, that now gives them legitimacy of what he's planning, right? Well, the rest of the country is totally oblivious. There's no idea. He's just going to make this happen. And like, all of a sudden, it's just going to be a thing. Right? Tell me if that's someone who lives in reality or not. Anyway, but I guess when you want to believe something, those things don't matter.
As you can imagine, a lot of people with their own perspectives on what Australia should look like in terms of a new constitution with the common law people. We've got a whole bunch of other things, Magna Carta and the rest.
All right, did you happen to see what he did when he said Magna Carta? He looked up to the ceiling like, oh, good grief. I can't believe I even had to go and say that. So somehow he's brought himself in to bring that into, his fantasy world he's going to have next year with, these people who don't think for themselves. And that's going to be a thing, right? Now let's see what he says about Magna Carta. It's a couple of weeks later, shall we? So just let me be right back. Okay, so if you listen to his language, right, he uses language of a dictator, right? He tells you what people have been told to do, right? And then he starts putting it in a way, if you really understand how things work, where they get to be the arbiters and the ones who control how everything happens. So I'll point it out when it happens. And just put
more than you can imagine. And all the supporter group leaders have been told, get out there and learn this.
So he said they've been told, the supporter group, they're being instructed, dictated to. Is that freedom? You decide.
Yourself. Lead the discussion. We don't expect you to come up with a constitution.
So we don't expect you. So again, Someone else is setting your standards for you, what's expected of you, expectations. Think about that.
But we expect you to study to the point where you can ask intelligent questions.
So they expect you to study to the point at which you can ask intelligent questions. Now, if they're setting all the expectations, does that not grant them the authority to decide what is intelligent and what isn't? Think about that. One of the videos I'm going to make is a bunch of questions. We'll see if whoever's watching, thinks they're intelligent, or are they too uncomfortable to face, right? So, and then if you're really keen, you can send them off to your leaders, your masters, and see what they do with it. So if you start telling people that, intelligent questions, you basically setting it up that you get to decide. And if you don't like them and they make you feel uncomfortable and they're going to expose something about your lack of knowledge, or that you might be running a psyop, well, then you just say they're unintelligent and not answering that. Just the easiest way out of it. And that's the whole system we've been running for thousands of years. No different. Get to cherry pick what and narrow down consciousness based on the parameters and the limits you set, because you are your own authority and you have imposed your authority over others. And if you've listened to this guy speak, he fully swears at people, right? He scares the crap out of people. Scares them into compliance. What's the difference between that and the current state we live in? I can't see a difference there.
And then start eking out of everybody what they think it might be. Now, 99% is going to be wrong because no Australian knows anything about it.
How's that? 99% is going to be wrong. He already knows that for a fact. How about that? He's met 99% of the population. He knows they're going to be wrong. That's amazing. Look at those superpowers this guy has.
Sovereignty. I mean it. They just don't. And the ones
that sort of plays in his hands that they don't know, wouldn't you say?
Think they do are harking back to some arsehole king 800 years ago that signed Magna Carta.
Which is all bullshit.
We don't care.
That is
You just said we don't care, right? Now, a moment ago, you saw him say, oh, yeah, we're going to include it, but I just really can't stand that we even had to say that word. And the host of this whole podcast is like, it's all bullshit. So we're going to show you the connection between Magna Carta 1215 and the American Constitution, and we'll see what these patriots, the ones who say it's bullshit, how they're going to walk back from that. And the other thing that he said, is that it was signed. No, it was sealed. Big difference. If you sign something, it's a contract. A sealing is a promise. And there's a massive difference between those two things. It's a contract you can only have between, a small number of individuals. You can't have a contract between a governing system and the people. That means each individual would need to have their signature on it and say that it applies to them. Big difference, guys. Very few people explain that to you. And I'm going to come back and give you some evidence of the actual how the link between the US Constitution, either one, whichever one you use, the 1871 or the 1776, it doesn't really matter, and the Magna Carta, except the US Constitution contorted it and turned it into something else that's not supposed to be that way. But the people don't know it, so they just clutch at it. All right, I'll be right back. Okay, this is called theamericanminute.com. You can just look it up for yourselves. Yeah, decide what you want. Just putting a resource out there for your consideration. It's up to you what you do with it. So the title is Magna Carta, History of Limiting Executive Power, Freedom of the Individual Against the Arbitrary Authority of the Despot. So if you've ever screamed out, that's not fair, that means that you understand individual rights, right? So that's the essence of everything that this is about. So if you think that's bullshit and, we don't need it, I'd like to see how you're going to progress forward from this moment and still believe there's going to be some kind of freedom, landscape of freedom available. I can't wait to see how that's going to happen. All right, just scrolling down because there's far too much here to get through. So here we go. Individual rights derived from the creator, which government should protect. I don't know, maybe you don't think that's something worthwhile. Liberty of the individual, family, and church. Possibly don't think that's worthwhile either. That's bullshit. We don't need it. Equal justice for all under the law. Also bullshit. We don't need it. And decentralized government. Definitely bullshit. We don't need that. We want concentrated power to forcibly dominate and control us. That's what you say when this is bullshit, right? So let's move along. I'm just trying to make it so it's not going to go for too long, this part. Okay, so where are we going? So British Judge Lord Denning described Magna Carta as the greatest constitutional document of all times at the foundation of the freedom of the individual against the arbitrary authority of the despot. That's what you saw at the heading. So I don't know if that matters to people. If they prefer despotism, it seems like they do. Especially as ones who proclaim themselves to be freedom fighters and free thinkers, light workers, etc. I'd like to show you how that's possible if you don't even understand the difference between the individual right and the collective and how the two are totally in opposition to one another. Magna Carta limited the previously unbridled centralised executive power. That's bullshit, isn't it? We don't want that. We actually want more centralised power. Winston Churchill stated in 1956, here's a law which is above the king. So it means no one is above the law, basically. It doesn't matter what your title is, how special you think you are, and how much you can fool others. Like, you can still be brought to justice, which even he must not break. The reaffirmation of a supreme law and its expression in a general character, is a great work of Magna Carta. And this alone justifies the respect in which men have held it. And then you got Sir Edward Coke. I know it's spelled Coke, but it's said Cook from what I'm told. And it's Edward, not Edwin, so there's another error here. Also in this piece here, they do say it was signed, and it's not correct, it was sealed. The Magna Carta will have no sovereign. I'm not entirely sure what that means. My take on it is that means there is no one man who stands above anyone else, right? So we're all equally sovereign. The Magna Carta began the process of redefining government's purpose from dominating people's lives, because that's what was happening before the sealing of it. That is a certain section of time between when the French came and invaded to 1215, where there's a lot more domination and people using their role of being in a position of service to being in a position of domination and power, the right of kings, all that stuff. And look at that says, culminating in the US Constitution. Political power changed from top down to bottom up. That was in theory, actually. In reality, no, it didn't. But that's what's there, waiting for everyone to pick up if they're interested and care enough. So Edward Cook's book, Institutes of the Law of England, which emphasised the importance of the Magna Carta, was studied by who? John Adams. Ever heard of him? Thomas Jefferson. Never heard of that guy. Why would they put that there? And James Madison. I wonder if they're important people that a lot of people bang on about, our founding fathers, all that stuff. But look who they studied. So Edwin Cook had written in 1610, case when an act of parliament is against the common right or reason, so that's your capacity to understand right from wrong, the common law will adjure such an act void. What he's talking about there is trial by jury. Very few people understand what that actually is. How come all these patriots, the ones who want the freedom, never talk about trial by jury? They never talk about that the way to decentralize power is through the independence of jury to judge the justice of anything that the legislative branch of public servants, because that's all they are. They're not your power brokers and dominators. They're just a pack of servants who are meant to act in service of you. If they do anything that breaches your sense of right and wrong, you get to annul it. And if they keep doing it, you get to bring them to justice before you. I mean, who wouldn't want that? That's the true nature of decentralized power. It's right there. Why aren't you being taught this? Right? Why are none of these patriots ever speaking about it? Or is there some kind of, not misunderstanding, let's say? I'll just err on the side of caution and say misunderstanding, or lack of interest in actually living free and still going back to a ruling class that gets to forcibly dominate, control you, and punish you for not paying tribute to it through using the force of the state to come down and if you don't pay the taxes they invent, to fund your own slavery. When Britain imposed the hated Stamp Act on the American colonies, the Massachusetts Assembly responded that it was against the Magna Carta and the natural rights of Englishmen, and therefore, according to Lord Coke, null and void. So that's what was going on back then, guys. How many people know that? Like I said, you can look it up for yourselves. These are just resources. Now I'm just going to point to the clauses in Magna Carta here and the amendments of the US so-called Constitution, which I don't actually believe it is, and I'm going to point to why shortly. So there's another one. If I read them all, I'll be here forever. So just slowly scrolling so you can have a quick read yourselves. No taxation without representation. Who's heard of that one? That's derived from clause 12 of Magna Carta. Clause 13, the US Constitution, Article 4, Section 2, Article 4, Section 1. So what else is there? Clause 20, the 8th Amendment. Clause 28, that's something reflected in the 5th Amendment about private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Clause 28, and that's the 6th Amendment in criminal prosecutions. The accused shall enjoy the right to be confronted with the witness against him. What about in any other prosecutions, right? Because they're civil as well. Doesn't it require someone who's the accuser to come and stand in and testify, that what they're saying is a statement of fact? Same with the fiscal matter. Would not require a living being to come and testify, something like that. Why would they leave that part out? big question, right? That's where it starts to get a bit murky here. Clause 39, reflected in the Fifth Amendment, nor shall any person be deprived of life, liberty, or property. You guys heard of that before, without due process of law. In the 14th Amendment, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Clause 40, to no one will we sell, to no one deny or delay the right of justice. It's reflected in the 6th Amendment. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury. Same thing, why just criminal? Got to ask yourself that question. What does impartial mean? Doesn't explain that as well. So there's other things about that have to be explained so you understand what that really means. Right now, you could take that as, there's a jury sitting on presiding over a case, but they're following the directions of a judge. That's not an impartial jury. That's order following, because the judge is deciding for them what they can and cannot judge on. That's following orders. What happened at the end of the Second World War? Isn't order following? Wasn't that universally agreed that that's the root of all evil? Well, that's what you've got to be really careful understanding that. What does impartial mean and how does it happen? So there's a bunch more stuff to read here. I'm not going to go into too much more of that. I'm going to go over to a resource section now. So this is from commonlawconstitution.org. Useful quotations to support trial by jury. So I'm not going to read them. You guys can do that. You can look it up if you're really interested and figure it out for yourselves. I'm just pointing to the resources, guys, so you can see where to go. Unlike other people, they just go figure it out by yourself. I'm just telling you don't know anything. That's all that you're getting. Where here you're getting pointed to resources to lead, yourself to figure it out and have a place to verify. So what have we got here? U.S. Chief Justice Harlan from the Harvard Law Review. What have we got? Crabb's History of English Law with Winston Churchill again. Blackstone's Analysis of Laws of England. Now, Blackstone, he was someone that the legal fraternity draws upon heavily, except what they do is they cherry pick aspects of his writings and then they contort it and distort it to make it seem like their version of reality is the world, the reality that all of us have, right? So that's using the legal system to contort truth, because the definition of legal is the undoing of God's law. So, but they still draw on him to do that. Bancroft in History of U.S. Constitution to Judge. I'm not going to say that name, so it's going to just twist my tongue around it. Then who else have we got? This is the case of Penn and Mead. So Pennsylvania comes from William Penn. That's where the state's name came from. David Hume, hopefully some people know who he is. History of England. Just quotes there from that. Blackstone again. Then you've got Sir Edward Cook. I just mentioned him a moment ago. Then we've got Callum's preliminary discourse on the laws of William the Conqueror. What was said there. This one's one of my favorites because it really says it. The jury is both the most effective way of establishing the people's rule and the most efficient way of teaching them to rule, because sovereignty means that you are self-governing. How many people know that? And he's telling you they don't know it, but is he helping you find out what it means? Tocqueville described the jury as the political institution embodying the sovereignty of the people and the very best way of preparing a people to be free. So there it is right there, guys. If you don't understand trial by jury, you don't understand the purpose of a constitution. That's just as plain and simple. And how have you been, has that even been pointed to you, right? That's the essence of why I've done any work to do with the Magna Carta, because that's the only place that's ever been agreed to where the people are in charge of themselves. There's no other place that's been agreed to, right? And I'm going to get into the US Constitution in a second. I'm just going to show you another resource. This is Democracy Defined. There it is. So it's just democracydefined.org. Highly recommend going looking here. Ken Diodowdney, I can't even say it correctly. Him and his family have done some incredible work, real scholarly work. So totally worthwhile looking into this and getting yourself informed to understand how the tricks have been done. And it goes through the history of it, right? So this is where I got a lot of my knowledge from here too. So big thanks to Ken for putting in all that time, energy, and effort. And the more people that start reading this and understanding it, the better off all of us would be, because it's all of our responsibility to understand how we can actually act on our individual rights and preserve them. Because if we don't do that for ourselves, who will? Is this guy going to do it? No, he's just shown you. He just wants you to be totally dependent on him. And so now I've got one more thing to show you, and that's Larkin Rose and how he explains the US Constitution to show you that it's a ruse. Okay, so this is Larkin Rose. He used to be a statist. That just means someone who believes that government has the right to use violent force to do that which you as an individual don't have the right to, and then you hide behind them. And he figured out that was totally immoral. And now, he's set on a course of trying to educate others as to how their belief systems are in opposition to their own moral values. So he explains the difference between the Declaration of Independence and the US Constitution, how the two are not the same, but most people confuse them and think they are. And that's one of the best tricks that's been played on the people. So, these people you think are forthright and there for you, etc., your founding fathers and stuff like that, they'll pull in a few sly ones at the same time because if you were really free as you thought you were, this whole, I don't know what you guys call what happened in America, that slow, rapid decline, slow and rapid, I think they're contradictions, but that rapid decline of moral values can't exist if we, the people, understand our individual rights. Right? So if that was never understood from the beginning, it was always going to go bent sideways. Doesn't matter how many guns you have, because it's what you understand intuitively and how you act on it that changes how you actually behave with one another. And very few people actually have that level of consciousness and awareness. So hopefully this is going to help you see that, if you're willing to see it. If you're not, obviously you're just going to be doubling down on your biases, and you just want to prove yourself right. And then I get a lot of that. So most people just want to stay enslaved because it feels more comfortable to be right and self-righteous than it does to actually look into, that maybe you've been sucked in. That takes a lot of courage, and not that many people have that. So let's listen to Larkin.
There's a lot of people are muddled in their heads between the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, and they sort of think of them as one big sort of thing that goes together. It is a direct betrayal of the ideas expressed in the Declaration of Independence.
So he's saying that the US Constitution is a direct betrayal. So whether you believe in the 1776 one, and you understand the 1871 one was the corporate one, that's a ruse in itself, because that 1776, like I showed you, already had so many sus things in there. So that was one of those things where they go, well, look, if we find out that this one's the dodgy one, the 1871, well, that means this one's a legitimate one. I mean, that's a classic trap right there. Let's listen on.
Declaration of Independence. Whenever any government becomes destructive of individual rights, it is the right and duty of the people to alter or abolish it. Constitution says that Congress has the right to call out the militia to quell insurrections. In other words, when you say, hey, we think you're getting out of line, the Constitution empowers them to send armed people to kill you. That's not pro-freedom. That's anti-freedom. That's pro-authoritarian control. But to pretend that they created a thing that has the right to rob you and that the purpose of that thing is to protect you is insane.
There you have it right there. That's how the mind trick works, guys. The robbing part just means that they use their violent force to make sure you pay and fund your own slavery, right, through the taxes that they invent, right? That's how it's funded. So it's a big ruse. Very few people are, willing to face that, because they've attached to it for so long. They're emotionally comfortable, believing that they were being free this whole time. No, you've all been enslaved, just in the more subtle way that you haven't been able to figure out for yourselves. How your ego is going to cope with that, we'll see, because the more resistance that you're showing is showing more ego than it is your intelligence. Because intelligence always wants to seek neutrality, not favoritism. The other thing is, like you would have heard, these patriot guys talk about, the US Constitution, they bang on about it, they hug it, but they don't understand it, and also how you heard that Captain Kyle guy say, it's all bullshit, right? Well, how can it be bullshit if he's attaching to the US, and you've just shown you how the two intertwine. One comes from the other. Same with this Bosey guy. He just said, we don't need it, it's rubbish, we don't need it, but I'll have the US version of it. How does that make sense, right? So these are all just things for you guys to decide for yourselves. I'm just putting some content out there. Doesn't have to be right or correct, but if you're really interested, you'll go and do your own investigations, right, and see what you come up with. I'm not asking you to believe anything. I'm just putting it out there, just putting in the field of possibilities. Look at it like that. It's up to you whether you lead with curiosity or whether you lead with wanting to be right, because self-righteousness is one of the biggest sicknesses that engulfs the planet. So if you want to giving more of your energy to that, then you're going to give more of your energy to violence and conflict. That's not my opinion. That's actually a stated fact of reality. That's the sad part, that most people don't even understand how reality works. All right, that's it. Okay, now just to finish off, I just want to draw your attention to, if you're interested in understanding where all this knowledge has come from and what it's connected to, here's a brilliant site for you. It's the Magna Carta 1215 Australia site. So just quickly, Magna Carta is that agreement that's still in place today that allows for a system of public servants throughout the entire English Commonwealth system of justice. And that's what all public servants swear an oath to. So they're bound by that entire structure. And so if you just want to have a quick look of where to find something that you can learn specific to do with police right now, I'd go to the Action Now page. So here it is here. And you can see there's letters here to the police constable, judicial officer, lots of information and things I just said there, but in a lot more detail, and the public servant one as well. And then there's different versions of that here, child protection, if they're using pre-crime, which they all do, which is just order following from legislative branch, which they have no authority to do. That makes them criminal as soon as they start dictating the minutiae of your life. Here you go, dear Police Commissioner, if you want to get even more detail, and this one's specific to Victoria. Okay, so there's lots for you to look through here. You've got news and articles, so you know there's plenty of things to read here, as you can see. So the first one here is the secure boundaries for freedom to prevail. That's what the Magna Carta is all about. Pretty much what I just described to you earlier, where the individual right to decide for ourselves and govern ourselves. That's what that protects. Otherwise, we're slaves, right? So it's really simple, and there's just more stuff here to do that. Just going to move over to the learning section. So you've got videos, so plenty of video resources here. The Magna Carta lessons, as you can see here. Then you've got, this is brilliant, this is 2-minute description of the true nature of the control system we live under. If you want to learn that real quick. So here's Will Kidd again. So he's done a few vids, as you can see. So he's done a lot of research on this topic, years and years. This is Mark Pascoe. This is about natural law. If you're really interested in that, because everything comes from the knowledge of natural law. And if you don't understand natural law, you'll always be controlled. This is an attempt to start getting from basics and principles and moving up to understanding how that fits in with the Constitution and what that really means. So that's another thing to look at here. John Locke does a lot of great stuff here on Article 61. So then you've got the reading version of that. So that's the, if you like that, you've got reading. So I'm just going to point you to one specific one. To me, this is the one I'd go to straight away if I really wanted to learn something, and that's this one, the Constitutional Treatise. This breaks it down really simply. So that's all I wanted to show you guys. If you are interested in educating yourselves and your children about how true freedom works and your rights and how they're protected under this structure, and anything else is a fiction, and it's deliberately created to actually bamboozle you to think that public servants have the right to forcibly dominate and control you and take your money and then treat you as their cattle and property, right? If you want to understand how that's been done, it's a great place to come and do it. That'll do.